Okay, everyone, let's go ahead and get started here. My name is Chelsea. I work as a Denver, Colorado technician here in our Denver, Colorado office. In the bottom right of your screen, you're going to see an icon for the chat. This is an interactive webinar. I'd like you to go ahead and open the chat. If you are currently able to hear my voice, enter a Y into the room for me. Let me know I'm coming through. All right, looks good. Welcome to the NinjaScript Editor 401 event. I do need to start with a very quick disclaimer. It is important to understand that there are substantial risks in trading commodity future contracts or foreign currency. You should carefully consider whether such trading is suitable for you. This will depend on your specific circumstance and financial resources. It is possible to lose all of the funds deposited with your account, and you can incur losses beyond these amounts. Please inquire at brokerage support at NinjaTrader.com for more information, or if you'd like to get a copy of the CFTC full risk disclosure. And do keep in mind that these training webinars are not a solicitation nor a recommendation, but are educational. All right, we're going to be using NinjaTrader 8 today. I see I needed to resume my share on that. Here's our disclaimer screen. We're going to be using NinjaTrader 8 today. If you haven't downloaded, I'm going to go ahead and throw in a link to where you can get the latest copy of our platform so you can follow along with these webinars. I'm also going to throw a few links into the room here to our social media. Here's our Twitter, our Facebook, and the NinjaTrader blog. All right, let's go ahead and jump into it today. So the idea of what we're going to be doing is generating a little bit of code using the strategy builder, and then we're going to take a look inside of the code and see what was created. We'll transfer some code between two scripts to kind of get an idea of where everything goes, and then we'll do a little bit of debugging as well. So to get started here, I'm going to open up a new strategy builder. We'll click New in Strategy Builder. All right, so the very first thing you have to worry about is the name of your strategy. This is used for the class name, which is the container that holds all of the code for your particular strategy. Since there is a sample MA crossover that's included with NinjaTrader, I'm going to call this one Simple MA Crossover. Let's take a look at what's been generated so far. I hit the View Code button down here in the bottom left corner of the Strategy Builder, and this will open up the NinjaScript Editor. So just by creating a strategy, NinjaTrader has generated our class, our default properties, and it has started the on-bar update. So here's what we're looking at. Our class is the container that contains all of the code for our particular strategy. This curly brace that comes after our declaration, and that's what this is here, a declaration of our class, is going to be the walls of that container. So this opening curly brace is the open. Down here at the bottom, you can see it has automatically highlighted the opposing curly brace, and this will be the close. Anything between these two curly braces is inside of this particular object. Inside of this are other objects. We have our methods. These are like functions in math. When you call the method, it'll run all of the code that's inside of it. We are going to be calling onStateChange on your behalf. As you open up the strategies window, it will run through all of the strategies, get these default values, and show those in the strategy window. When you click Add to add an instance, it'll run through these again, and then we'll go through state.configure as you click OK, and from there we'll load up all the historical data. It'll reach state.historical, and from there we'll start triggering on-bar update. Now these are methods that we are triggering behind the scenes that we've defined as part of the strategy class. You can also create your own methods, and they would also be within the scope, and that means inside of our class as well. Now our package is inside of a larger package, and that's the namespace. This is the strategies namespace, and it contains all of the code for strategies. Things like on order update or being able to place orders. Those are particular to strategies. Then we have a larger container that's in, and that's NinjaScript. So ideas such as on state change and on bar update, which work in both indicators and strategies, those are going to be in part of that larger namespace that holds all of the code for NinjaScripts. And that's inside of a larger container that holds all of the code for NinjaTrader. Okay, so we know that these curly braces are going to be containing our code. What I'd like to do next is make a copy of this as it is, so that way we can continue using the strategy builder to generate code, and we can copy that code over to a blank strategy and kind of get an idea of where everything goes. So to make my copy, I'm going to do that here in the actual strategy builder. Before I continue, I'm going to hit the compile button just to make sure everything is saved. As long as it generates successfully, this strategy can be run. So I'll hit the back button here. On the welcome page is where you would make this copy. So if I hover the mouse over this strategy, I get the option to save as. Now, anything locked in the strategy builder has to be copied in the strategy builder. Once the script is unlocked, at that point, you would make that copy in the NinjaScript Editor, and we'll demonstrate that next. So we'll hit Save As here. I once again need to use a unique name. So we'll call this Simple MA Crossover Unlocked, because I'm planning to unlock this, add some code to it by hand. So click OK on that, and I'll hit Next here. And you can see this is now the new name of our copy. It just has the default. It doesn't have any of the code in it. You may want to make your copy later on, but I want to use this opportunity to copy code back and forth. So I'm going to hit the Unlock Code button. This is a permanent change. When I hit the button, you see a warning will appear. It says, hey, you can manually edit this generated code, but you can no longer use the strategy builder. If I scroll down, do you want to proceed? So this is a warning just letting us know that this is a one-way street. There's no undo. There's no button to put it back in the strategy wizard. There's no way to undo the code. That's why you should make the copy before you actually do your unlock. And that way you can keep the copy in the original in the strategy builder. So I'll click OK. Yes, knowing that this is a permanent change and that I have my original still locked for editing. It has opened up the NinjaScript Editor, and we can see the code for it. And we now know that this is the unlocked one. What I'd like to do is I'd like to get both of our strategies that we have here in one NinjaScript Editor so I can flip back and forth on the tabs. So I've got my copy. Again, I'm going to right click here and compile just to make sure everything's saved. And to get them in one window, I have to go back to the strategy builder, find that original script. Here it is. And again, hit the View Code button. So this gives me a new editor. And in this editor, since my unlock script is unlocked over here, I can now open this script in the same editor. Down here at the bottom, you see these tabs. This is our original script, currently locked for editing. And this is our unlocked script that we can start typing in by hand. Okay, so before we move on too far, I'm going to ask a couple of questions in the room. I welcome your questions as well. So if you have anything that is on topic for what we're doing today, throw those in the room. While we're filling out these polls, I'll take a moment to answer any questions I see. So here's my poll here. If two scripts use the same name, how can these be distinguished? The version number will tell them apart. The date the script was made will tell them apart. The names will be duplicated in the list and will not be distinguishable, or the script names must be unique because they are used for the class name. We'll go ahead and stop the poll here. The answer is going to be the last answer. The script names must be unique because they are used for the class name. And in C#, we won't be able to have two classes with the same name. Let's ask another question here. If a script is unlocked and will not open with the strategy builder, how can it be relocked? It cannot be relocked, or click the relock button. Maybe click undo until the script is back in wizard mode, or remove all of the custom code, and that'll put the script back in wizard mode. All right, well, I want to give enough time for everyone to answer, but I'll go ahead and stop the poll here. So the first answer, it cannot be relocked. So that's why it's a very good idea to go ahead and make a copy of your script before unlocking it. Let's go ahead and move on. So we've got our unlock script here. We've got our lock script over here. Let's go back to the strategy builder and actually generate a little bit of code. Now I am going to do this fairly quickly. If you are interested in what's available in the strategy builder, join me next week on alternate Thursdays. We switch out the strategy builder 301 and our NinjaScript Editor 401. It'll be at the same time, 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern. So let's run through this real quick. Default properties we'll leave alone. We don't need an additional data series. What we do need, and what we're going to be creating, is a moving average crossover. So we're going to have a fast and slow moving average. And we want the user to control the number of bars included with that moving average. So we'll put in a couple of controls for our user. I'll hit add here. We'll put in a fast period. I am going to default this to a value of 7. And I'll put in a description for the user, the number of bars for fast moving average. And we'll add that input in. We'll add in a second input here, and this will be our slow period. I'm going to default this to twice the length, and this will be the number of bars for slow moving average. Okay, so we've got the controls for the moving averages. Let's also add in some controls for the distance. We want to put our stops and targets. So I'm going to add in another input. This will be our profit target variable. I'm going to default this to 20. And this will be the number of ticks from entry target is placed. Just to save a little time here, I'm going to copy and paste this description because it'll be very similar for our stop loss. So let's add that in and put in a new input here, and we'll call this our stop loss variable. I'll default this to a value of 10. And this will be the number of ticks from entry our stop is placed. All right, so now we've got some controls for the user. For this particular script, I don't need any of the variables at the bottom. Those are going to be used just for things that you need to save a value in, but you don't want the user to be able to change. Let's go ahead and move on to the next page, our conditions and actions. So what we want for set 1, we want the fast moving average crossing above the slow moving average. So let's add that condition in. So in the indicators section, I'm going to select the SMA indicator. And in here, we'll leave bars that go at 0. We'll leave it on the default input, but I am going to check the box for plot on chart. That'll put it on the chart automatically when we start our script. For the period, I'm going to click set and use our user input fast period. So we'll get whatever the user has selected, or we'll get that default of 7. For the color, to represent fast, I'm going to choose red. We'll leave the offset alone. In the center, we want a cross above condition. So I'm going to use that as our operator here. And on the right, once again, I'm going to select the SMA indicator, check the box for plot on chart, and for the period, set this to our user input slow period. And again, the user will set that, or it'll use our default of 14. For the color, to represent slow, I'm going to choose blue. So that's our cross above statement. When the SMA with the fast period crosses above the SMA with the slow period within 1 bar, down here at the bottom, I'm going to hit add. We'll add in an action of enter long position. So this is just going to place a buy market order. Now for set 2, this is going to be very similar. We're just going to have the same condition above changed to a cross below, and then an enter short. So to save a little bit of time, I can copy this condition. So right click on it and copy, come down here to the bottom to add a new tab. And here in set 2, I'm going to right click and paste. And we're going to change this. So I'm going to hit edit. And in the condition window, just change cross above to cross below. And what's nice about that is it's kept all of the other properties. We've got our plot on chart still set, our fast and slow period and colors. But we have the exact opposite condition now, cross below. And to do the following, I'm going to hit add and add in the enter short position. Okay, I'm moving on to the last page, stops and targets. We'll add in a profit target. For the mode, I'm going to set this to a number of ticks. And for the value, we'll let this be the user input profit target. That defaults to 20, but the user can change it. We'll also add in our stop loss. I'm going to set this to a number of ticks as well. And then in value, we'll click set and set this to our stop loss variable. Okay, we've got the code that we want. Now we need to save it. I'll hit compile here. It has generated successfully. You may have noticed in the background, it has updated the code in our script. So let's talk about what it has actually added here. So at the top, the first thing it has done is declared a few variables. These are private. These are not user inputs. These are variables that are just here to track information internally in the script. Specifically, these are indicator variables. Now, once the data is loaded and our strategy is actually starting to run, we call the SMA as a method. These parentheses here on SMA, this is how you would actually call something as a method. If you're declaring a method, you can see you use those same parentheses in your declaration. So SMA, it's a class, and we call it as a method. We're supplying to it the close series. Now that we're in data loaded, that data is available, and that data can be supplied to our SMA. We are also supplying to it the fast period. Now, if I put my cursor just on the inside of that parentheses, and I hold Control Shift and tap the space bar, that will pop open the IntelliView. This IntelliView is giving you an opportunity to see how to call this particular method, or it will tell you what this particular object is and how it's used. For this, we can see that it accepts a series. That's our close series here. And a series is going to hold one value for every bar on the chart. So this is going to be the close prices of all of the bars on the chart. The period here is an integer, and that's going to represent the number of bars used for the SMA. Now, once we call that, we could just get a value from it, but instead, we'd like to continue getting values from it, and we'd also like to be able to modify some of the properties in it. So we keep this alive, and it stays in memory, and it continues processing new data as it appears on the chart. To continue accessing this instance of the indicator, we are assigning it to our SMA1 variable. So anytime we call SMA1, we're calling this SMA that is now in memory. Once we've got it in memory, we can start to dig into it. As an example, the SMA has one plot, so we can only modify that one plot. The dot plots is a collection, and I'll do the control shift space here. This plot is a collection of all of the plots that are available from that particular indicator. All indexes in programming start with 0. 0 is the first element. The 1 would be the second element. So in the MACD, that has 3 different plots. It's got the MACD plot, that's plot 0. It's got the average plot, that's plot 1. And it's got the diff plot, and that's plot 2. We use these brackets here. So you'll notice the bracket is straight. It's very similar to the curly brace, and it's the same button on your keyboard. But the brackets here, these are used as indexes. So that's where if there is a collection of something, you can pick a specific element out of that by choosing its index. And that's what this is going to be here. If we control shift space, it just tells us the index of the plot. So it only has one plot. What we do is we grab that plot, and one of its children is a brush. That's the color of it. And we're assigning it a value of red, brushes.red. Now this is still alive, so we call add chart indicator, and this SMA1 being supplied to it allows NinjaTrader to just pop that right onto the chart for you as soon as the strategy is enabled. We're doing the same thing here for our slow with the SMA2. Inside of this, we are passing to it the series, and we're passing to it a period. Anytime you're using multiple things that you're trying to supply to a method, or if you're declaring an array and you need to have multiple objects in the array, it is going to be separated by a comma. So that's what this comma is used here for, when you're separating multiple objects that are going to be supplied to whatever it is you're calling. Could be, a new instance of a class, or calling an indicator, or declaring an array. Anytime you have multiple objects you need to feed to something, those are going to be separated by commas. At the end is a semicolon. This semicolon is terminating this command. Part of the reason we do this is because spaces in new lines don't have a lot of meaning. You do have to have some kind of space in between each one of your assignments and next action there. However, you can write this entire script on one line without using the enter key. So if you had all of this code on one line, it would know that this particular command is done because we have terminated it with a semicolon. What I'd like you to notice is with these if statements, you'll notice with the if statement, now this is called a branching command. It works as a switch. If what you supply to it is true, and this is going to evaluate as true or false, if this is true, then it is going to trigger what's inside of the action block for it, inside of these two curly braces. If the value is a false, it is not going to trigger the action between those curly braces. But notice there is no semicolon after the if statement. There's no semicolon after the opening curly brace. There's no semicolon after the closing curly brace. So most of the time you're only using this semicolon when you're saying do something. Assign this to this. Declare this and make it exist. Or call a method. Anytime you're doing an action, something like that, that's going to be terminated by that semicolon. I'm going to talk a little bit more about syntax. We do have a question in the room, and I don't want to go too far without answering your question. Can I use the strategy builder to build an indicator? And if so, how? For example, I want to know if the current bar's close is higher than the previous bar's close. Now you can actually do that. And what we'll be doing today is using the strategy builder to generate some code. If you were to create an indicator, you could then copy that code into an indicator, which is what we're going to be doing in a short while here. So if you wanted to draw a dot exactly where the current bar is higher than the previous bar's close, you could absolutely do something along those lines using the strategy builder and then copy the code over to an indicator. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue on here. I've talked about the semicolon, the curly braces, the parentheses, and commas. Let's talk a little bit more about assignment operators and comparison operators. Up at the top here, we have a branching command where we're doing a comparison. We're checking to see if our state, which NinjaTrader is changing behind the scenes, is currently equal to state.setDefault, so we know what state it's in. We use two equal signs when we're doing a comparison for equals. When we are using one equal sign, we are doing an assignment. We're saying take this and assign it to this. There are a few other assignment operators and comparison operators I'd like to discuss. So let's declare a double. We'll say double, my double equals 5. I've both declared this and assigned it at the same time. My double now has a value of 5. And if we were to compare my double to B5, we would use a if statement. If my double equals 5, and we'll do a method called print, and that'll print to the output window, and we'll just say condition true. And I'll try and compile. As long as I haven't made any mistakes, it'll compile. So right now, this would print as condition true. Now we can, let's say we wanted to add 2 to this. We could say my double equals my double plus 2. Right? So we could write in my double plus 2. We would be adding 2 to my double, which is now 7, assigning it to my double. This condition would no longer be true. No more print. But we can shorten this up. We can say my double plus equals 2. And this is exactly the same thing. This accumulates 2 to whatever my double already is. I could say minus equals 2, and it would now have a value of 3. I can also use a / as division, and this is going to now have a value of 2.5. I can use the asterisk as multiplication. This will now have a value of 10. With our comparisons, we have a few options as well. We can use the greater than or equal to 5. This would print as true because my double now has a value of 10, and that is greater than or equal to 5, so this would evaluate as true. We also have less than or equal to 5. This would no longer be true. And we have the exclamation mark equals 5, and that means is not equal to. And because 10 is not equal to 5, this would print as condition true. So I just wanted to show a few more of those operators. And basically, that's most of the stuff you're going to see as you're making very simple scripts as far as syntax goes in this C#. So the next part I want to do is start moving the code from one script to another. And as I do so, I need to pay very special attention on where things are, and I mean that in scope. So, as an example, these variables, I like to copy the variables first. However, these variables are in the scope of our class, so they're within the curly brace of our class. That means that these variables can be used anywhere inside of our class in any of these methods. Down at the bottom, we have a properties section. This is where we put in those inputs that the user can change. Now, these are also within the scope of our class. If we put our cursor just on this curly brace right here, and we highlight it, if we scroll up to the top, we can see that the opposing curly brace that's highlighted is the curly brace for our class. So when we put this in, we need to make sure it's also within our class. Let's go ahead and do the variables. I do variables first because you're going to need them later, and it just helps to prevent errors if you copy those first. So I've just highlighted them. I'm going to select copy. We'll go to our unlock script. Again, I'm going to find our class declaration, find that curly brace, add a new line right underneath that. So I'm inside of that object, and I am going to paste that in. So there are our private variables. I'm going to go back to my original script, scroll down to the bottom, and I am going to grab the region properties that contain all of our inputs. I'm going to take this whole section. We'll right click on that and copy. I know that this is within the scope of my class, so I'm going to go to my unlock script. I'll highlight my class curly brace, come down here to the bottom to see which one that one is. And I can see it's the one on line 67, so I'm going to put mine in right above that to make sure it's still inside of that object. So we'll right click and paste right in there and clean it up a bit. All right, now we've got our public inputs. At this point, it won't give us an error. If we try and use those, they do have to be declared first. Okay. I am now going to copy the setting of the defaults. Now I could copy all of this, but when I duplicated my strategy, all of these were already copied. I technically just need to get the new inputs that I created and have a default value for those set. So I'll click copy on that, go to our copy script and put it in right at the same part in state.setDefaults. So we've got our defaults in there now. We come back to our original script, and the state.configure doesn't have anything in it. It's just an empty else if. So we don't need that, but we do need the state.dataLoaded. Now you'll notice in the unlock script, that has not been generated. We need that entire else if. So I'm going to come back to my original script, and I am going to copy the entire state.dataLoaded. So what I'll do is I'll put my cursor on the right side of this curly brace for the else if above it. I don't want to include it. I'm just starting to the right of it. By clicking and dragging to the right and including the entire else if and curly braces, right here you can see it looks like it's highlighted a space. That's our return line. So I can get that return, get that new line to get copied with it. So I'll right click on that and copy. Come to my unlock script, put my cursor right at that same spot, right click and paste, and you can see it throws in my new line, throws in all that code nice and neat. Now the last thing I need is the on-bar update. And I just want the logic that's inside of it. And I need to make sure that when I copy it, I also copy this into on-bar update. So I'll paste that in. Let's take a quick look at what happens when you are putting these in the wrong place. So if I type the word print, I'm trying to print the time of the bar. Time is a series, and this uses a bars ago index. So this is 0 bars ago, so it's the time of the current bar. If I put this in on bar update, this is a perfectly valid place to put this code, and I can compile that, and it's going to print the time every single time the bar updates. However, if I try and take this code, and I'll cut it, and I'll put it outside of on bar update, so it's in the scope of our class like all of our variables are. So I'll paste that in here. It's below on bar update. And you can see it doesn't like that. It has started generating errors. If I right click and try and compile, I cannot compile it. The compile fails because I have these error messages. What it's actually telling me is that it is expecting this to be inside of a method. If I were to move this back inside of on bar update, at that point I'll be able to compile because it's inside of a method. I didn't want paste, I wanted compile. Now, if I were to move this And let's erase this. If I were to move this inside of onState change, let's say I put it in right here where I'm setting my default variables. If I try and compile, the compiler is at least going to recognize that this is a method call that's happening in onState change, but it is not yet running your script. So we have satisfied the syntax, but what we have not satisfied is the logic. When you try and run this strategy, it's going to try and during the part where it pulls the defaults, it would try and print the time. At that time, this doesn't exist. The time of all of our series have not been yet loaded. So this is not going to hold anything. And what'll happen is we'll get a runtime error. So I just want to point out there's a difference between runtime errors and errors that you get when you're trying to compile. The runtime errors are going to go to the log tab of the control center. So keep that in mind. Now let's talk a little bit about the error messages. So I'll put this in again down here at the bottom. It's in the wrong place. If I try and compile, I get messages and I cannot compile. Now over here on the tab to the left, we've got the original script that we made with the strategy builder. We know that there are no errors in that script because we've already compiled it. But if we go over to that tab and we try and compile, we cannot compile. Notice that the color has gotten much, much brighter. If you have an error in any script at all, you will not be able to compile any other script. All scripts have to compile at the same time. That's just something with C#. It has to take all of the code and turn it into computer language, and it can't do that if there is an error anywhere at all. So if we look at the NinjaScript file column, this tells us by name what script has the error. Notice this says simple MA crossover unlocked. The tab we're on is simple MA crossover. This really bright solid orange is telling us we're actually not in the right file. If we go back to the file with the error, it gets dull. It's like a dull orange. We're no longer trying to get your attention that you're in the wrong file. Instead, we're simply trying to let you know you have an error. So that real bright color, that's to tell you you're in the wrong file. But look at the NinjaScript file column. That's going to tell you which script has the error. Here's a real quick way to get to the error. I went ahead and closed the tab that has that script. If I just double click on the error message, it reopens the script and it tries to place the cursor right on that line of code that's causing that error. So if I were to take this, we'll take it again and put it in onBar update. Now we can compile. If we go back to our original script, you can see it no longer has errors. We can compile that now too. Okay, once again, before we move on, let's make sure everything's making sense. For this, I am going to need to bring up a slide. So take a look at the slide that I have in the room. On line 92, I've got a print there. My question is when will this print on line 92 trigger, and will this code compile? It will compile and it will trigger after onBar update has run. It will compile but never trigger. It will not trigger, it will not compile, or it will trigger but not compile. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop the poll. The answer here is that it is not going to trigger because it did not compile. This is in the wrong place. It is outside of onBar update. So that brings me to my next question. Taking another look at this slide, on what line could we move this print so that it will run once per bar? Add a new line after line 89 and move the print to line 90, the new line. Replace line 90 meaning erase what's on it and put our print there. Add a new line after line 71, move the print to the new line on 72, or add a new line on line 76 and move our print to line 77. Where is an appropriate place to move this so that it runs once per bar? I'm going to go ahead and end the poll once again. So there's actually two correct answers here. The first answer, if you were to add a new line after line 89 and add the print to line 90, that would be inside of on-bar update. It would be at the bottom of on-bar update, but still inside of the curly braces. The other correct answer would be to add a new line after line 76 and move the print to line 77. That would be the first line inside of the curly braces for on-bar update. All right. So we have copied all of the code over. We now have a script that we can compile. Let's go ahead and run this. I'm going to open up a new chart. So here's our new chart. I'm going to go ahead and run the strategy. We'll right-click on the chart, select Strategies, select the Simple MA Crossover Unlocked. We're going to be making some modifications in a moment. And down here at the bottom, I'll click Add to add an instance. Over on the right, I do need to check the box for Enable to turn the script on. So we'll click OK. This is letting me know it's going to place orders without any confirmation. And here we go. What we're looking at on the chart is historical data. These are historical virtual orders. And this is the equivalent of a back test. Where there's a cross, there's an order. Here's a cross, here's an order. We are using calculate on bar close. And what that means is that it won't detect the cross until the bar closes. Once the bar is fully closed, we place our order, and that usually shows up as the open of the next bar if you're using a market order. It may be a little bit later if you're using a different order type. So visually, we can see the crosses and we can see the orders on the chart. However, your strategy may be more complex than just looking at a couple of indicators. You may have some custom calculations going on. So let's say that we didn't have these indicators on the chart to be able to visually see where the crosses are happening. In the code, I am going to comment these lines out, line 71 and 72. That's where we're adding the indicators to the chart. Up here, I can comment lines. It just adds 2 slashes to the front. Anything that has 2 slashes does not get evaluated as code. So I'll right-click on this and compile. And if you keep your eye on these orders, here's our sell short, profit target here, buy here. I'll reload the script, and you can see it's removed the indicators, but the logic is the same. All of the orders are still in the same place. So maybe we want to know why things are happening. As a random bar here, I can see the price dip down, came back up, came back down. As it was coming here, it looked like it dipped back up enough that maybe I think there should be an order here. So I'm going to choose a random bar, maybe the bar before it, 149. And I want to know why the order is at the one after the 150 bar and not the 149 bar. So what we do is we print out all of the values used in the condition that triggers that order. And this is basically known as debugging. So what I want to do, now I could just print the time anytime this cross above condition is true. So I would at least know on what bars it was true, and I can know that this condition was the one that didn't evaluate as true. But I want to know the why. I want to know why it didn't evaluate as true. So let's print out all of the values. Now we could use print, and I could, smush everything together with a bunch of plus marks like this. But to make things nice and neat, I use something called string.format. That's part of C#. So if I type the word string And then format here, you can see it's being suggested as a method. So I'll go ahead and click on that. It is a method, so it does use those parentheses. I'll put in a closing parentheses for our print method and a semicolon to terminate that command. Now inside of string.format, the way this works is it's going to let you type a string, and then it'll have some special, I call them tokens. The way that it says it here is it says it replaces a format item in a specified string with a corresponding object. Here's what it looks like. First of all, we need a string, and that's 2 quotation marks. And what it looks like is a curly brace, an index, and a curly brace. 0 would be the first one. Now what this is doing is it is replacing an actual object. So for that, I want to replace the time. Anything that's not in the string representation format, the format string here, again, I refer this as a token because I think that's less confusing. This token is being replaced by the time. Anything I type that is not one of those tokens is printed as plain text. So I'll put in a little bit of a label here. I'm going to type SMA1, bracket 1 bracket. I want to know what the SMA1 is on the previous bar. Let's go ahead and take a look at this small bit that we have here. So I'll go ahead and compile. I'm going to shrink this down for just a little bit so we can kind of look back and forth. And I'm going to open up the NinjaScript output window. All of your prints and trace orders are going to go to the NinjaScript output window found in the new menu, right here at the bottom. All right, so let's reload the script. Right-click on the script and click Reload. And here's what's happening. We're getting information about every bar on the chart. In here, my token is being replaced by the time. This is the time replacing that token. This text here, the vertical line and the label, this is not a token, so it gets printed as plain text. And I am going to use that as a label. So let's add on to that our next token. Again, these are indexed, so it starts with 0 and then 1. So we'll put in a replacement for 1. That's going to be the SMA fast on the previous bar. Let's take a look at that real quick. We'll compile, clear the output window, and then I'm going to reload the script. So here we go. We've got our token, our first token, which is curly brace 0 curly brace, and that's printing out the time. And then we have our label, and I highly recommend using labels so you know what these values are meant to be. This label is just letting us know this is the SMA fast on the previous bar. Then we have our second token, curly brace 1 curly brace, and we are replacing that with the actual value of the SMA fast on the previous bar. This is the actual value being printed here in the output window. Let's continue with this idea. What we need to know is the fast and the slow on the previous bar. Then we need to know the fast and the slow on the current bar. So if it starts out as less than and ends up on the current bar as greater than, we know that it crossed above. So I'm going to put in a little bit more label. I'm going to put in a greater than symbol, a less than symbol, because we know it needs to start out as less than. And it needs to be less than the SMA2. So I'm going to put in SMA2 bracket 1 bracket to represent the slow from 1 bar ago. And put in our third token, which is curly brace 2 curly brace. And we're replacing that with the SMA 2 bracket 1 bracket of 1 bar ago. Let's compile, take a look. And here's what we get. We get the time, we get a label for our fast, we get the value of our fast, we get a little bit of a label to know that it needs to be less than, we get the label for our SMA2, and then the value for the SMA2. So at this point, we can tell on the previous bar if the fast started out less than the slow. We need to also know if it has crossed above on the current bar. So we'll keep adding to this. I'm going to add an ampersand to know that the second half of this has to be true. And we'll put in SMA 1 bracket 0 bracket to represent the current bar. And we'll put in our fourth placeholder, curly brace 3 curly brace, greater than SMA 2 bracket 0 bracket. And this will be our fifth placeholder, curly brace 4 curly brace. There we go. Now we need a replacement for this fourth one. This is going to be SMA 1 bracket 0 bracket. And we need a replacement for our fifth placeholder, and this will be SMA 2 bracket 0 bracket. All right, let's use this information. So I'll compile, clear the output window, reload the script. All right, it looks like a ton of information, but this is what we can use to understand the behavior of any bar on the chart. Particularly, I was looking here at the 149 bar. So let's go find 149. That's why we're printing out the time of the bar so we know what bar we're getting this. Here's the 149 bar right here. Let's look at its information. So the fast on the previous bar was at 2871.10. That needed to be less than the slow, which was currently at 2871.82. That actually is true. It was less than on the previous bar. Let's see if it crossed above. So on the current bar, the fast is at 2871.50, and that needed to have risen above the slow, which is at 2871.76. So it didn't actually cross over. The 7150 is not greater than 7176, so that's not true. But on the next bar, there is an order. Let's see if the next bar shows an order there. So we have our fast on the previous bar at 2871.50, which needed to be less than the slow at 2871.76. That's true. And now it needs to have risen above. So the fast on the current bar is at 2871.53. It's gone up a little bit. And the slow is at 2871.48. That's not true, is it? 71.53. Oh, yeah. 71.53, that's definitely greater than 71.48. Yeah. So, yeah, this whole thing is true. So because that whole line is true, we now know that that's why our condition evaluated is true, and that's why we get an order on that particular bar. So printing out this information is a great way to understand the behavior of your script. Use prints throughout the entire development process and for debugging, and this will give you an idea of what you need to change or just understand why it's behaving the way it's behaving. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and finish up. If you have any remaining questions, please throw those into the chat. So the question here is, why are prints important? Prints allow conditions to be true so that an order can be placed. A print can provide a signal for you to automatically trigger a trade. A print added to the same action block of a condition statement as an order would let you know if that condition was true and if an order was triggered from that condition. And printing all of the variables used inside of a condition on the outside of that condition would let you know if that condition will evaluate as true or false and give you the why. In the chat, I've got a question. If I want all of my scripts to appear together at the top, what is the best character to start the class name with? And are there character restrictions in the class names? Well, there are character restrictions. Off the top of my head, I can't remember what they are. A lot of users will put an underscore there. Now, the strategy builder is not going to allow you to do that. But if you unlock the script, you can do that by hand. You can put an underscore there, and that'll throw them up at the top. Instead of using a special name, another way you could do this is to make a folder. So if you right-click on Strategies and click on New Folder, give this a name like My Strategies or something. So I've got a folder here. I can drag and bring this back open, pin it. I can drag and drop into this My Strategies folder as soon as I close my strategy here. It doesn't like to make those kind of changes while you have it open, so we'll close it first. All right, so drag and drop it in there. You can see it's now in the folder called My Strategies. And we'll remove this from the chart. Hit F5 here. All right, so what it throws the folders in at the top. So if you have some of your own strategies and you want them always at the top, throwing them in a folder is a good way. And you can open that folder and you'll see all of your stuff grouped together. And then you don't have to worry about changing the name on that. You can also keep it locked in the strategy builder as well. Thanks for your question. I appreciate that. So the answer for this poll, let me go ahead and stop the poll. There's two correct answers, but one I'd like you to focus on. So if you were to add a print to the same action block of a condition statement as an order, it would let you know that condition is true, but it's not going to tell you the why. So the last answer, printing the variables used in a condition outside of that condition, would let you know if the condition will evaluate as true or false and why. That is also correct, but that's the one I'd like you to focus on. That's what we were doing together as we're printing out the fast and slow on the current and previous bar, so we can decide for ourselves whether or not that's going to evaluate as true or false. Okay, thanks for joining me, everyone, today. If you got any further questions, don't hesitate to contact us at platformsupport@ninjatrader.com. I want to say happy trading from everyone here at NinjaTrader. And so long.